Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
Doing fine, and we're going to talk today about Venezuela, which we have done before, but there's some breaking news right now, which shouldn't surprise anybody because it's an ongoing event there. You know, it's been going on for a long time. In some ways, our interference in Central and South America has been going on for a long, long time.
Yeah.
But this is more the same. It's been updated right now because it's on dealing with Venezuela, and they just happen to have the second amount of oil in the ground, and so it's a very important country. And evidently, the Russians and the Chinese, they've saved a little money in their military budget, and they've invested down there, and that annoys the Americans because we keep spending money on the military, and we forgot about how free enterprise might invest in countries like this. But anyway, the story last night was that Guaido, virtually declared war, come out and this is it, and this overthrow the government. And immediately the United States, we support them, which we've known for all along. They've been supporting, they created them, So, and then the usual suspects, the Rubios and Bolton and Pompeo, guess what? They're all gun-ho over this, but they're not for war. What they're for is to restore democracy and constitutional law to Venezuela. And here's a bunch of clowns. That's too strong. There's a bunch of clowns. They don't have the vaguest notion about what the constitutional law in our country would be like. Yeah. And they're going to spread it and restore the constitutional law of these other countries. It's just cliches and nonsense. And fortunately, more people are beginning to realize that you're not supposed to believe these people. Pompeo, recently announced we lie, and that's part of our job, cheating and stealing and doing all these things. So, but anyway, that's what they've tried now. There's been a lot of sanctions put on Venezuela. They have enough problems of their own with an inefficient government that's led to a lot of problems. But it has been made worse by sanctions, hurting the people. And this generally is the case, which we will never admit, that the sanctions, we got to get rid of that leader. And if we hurt the people, they're going to overthrow their government. I don't know if it's ever worked. It solidifies the support and probably pushes us one step closer to a military confrontation. And right now, there's some pretty strong language. I would say it's the strongest we've had with these two factions right now of coming close to some military confrontation, which may develop rather quickly now, today, next day, or whatever, because this is exactly what they're talking about. This is it. Guaido and the United States declared he's the president. Yeah. So who should object to this? So so the confrontation is moving along, and I think in a way Guaido is going to have to prove himself, or he'll be totally inefficient. Maybe the United States is thinking that too, because they've talked about this for a long time, and my guess is they probably thought that they would have gotten rid of Maduro a long time ago. I think they misassessed the people in Venezuela, and also that there's more support there than they realize.
Which is ironic, because the whole purpose of the coup was to restore democracy and the people's choice for president. Obviously, if the people were in favor of Guaido, he would have been successful. But Guaido made a video at dawn, flanked by well-armed military people who've, I guess, defected from the army or something, a few of them, and right near an air base just outside of Caracas. And he said, this is the final phase of our plan to overthrow the government. And it sort of smacks of desperation, because he declared himself president in January and nothing happened. He kept trying to do things to get the military to turn, and he didn't. He was unsuccessful. And we know very well that in the interim, the CIA and others have been bribing soldiers from Venezuela. They've even admitted it, bribing, blackmailing, doing whatever they can to get these people to turn. This is ongoing as we speak right now, and some developments are happening as we speak. We don't know how successful it'll be. We know there has not been anything remotely near a critical mass, but violence is starting to break out. And that is really tickling the neocons pink. They love it.
And you would think the inconsistencies and hypocrisy of our government and our media would sort of give us some information. Just think of 2016. There was hints and propaganda that said that that Trump won because of interference by a foreign entity.
Yeah.
Russia was the bad guy. And a lot of people either believed it or they were hoping it was true because Republicans and Democrats came together. The Republicans were the anti-Trump people, and all the Democrats, and it was outside influence on our election. Wow, this is horrible, worst thing that's ever happened to our history, and we have to do something. So even the Republicans joined in on an investigation. Went on for 2.5 years. And even though they're still diehards, they found out that there was no interference. But that had nothing to do with what they really believe, because we've mentioned so many times, how many places have we been involved in the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years? I mean, that's our business, is solidifying our empire. And this time, you know, the coup that has been going on in the process is just part of it, and nobody says anything. You know, there's the media, and they're not even bashful about it. Yeah. You know, we are taking it over. You know, but it's all for truth and justice and democracy and freedom and showing other people how they should live and live up to our Constitution, which is so much misinformation, and I think it's pure hypocrisy for us to think that we are doing this and we were against government interference. We love it, except when we don't. And then the whole thing that got us into trouble with that 16 is because those Republicans, there was the bipartisan support of it. But now there's this, there's the establishment, there's the media, and political bipartisanship to say, oh, once again, we can't say anything good or bad about Guaido, because that means we might be sympathizing with Russia, and Russia's involved here. So I guess the big danger is a hot war breaking out. I'm still betting it's not going to get too bad. I don't think there's going to be thousands of troops moving, but it could be a guerrilla war, something like that. If there's a false flag or some important official on either side gets killed, you can't tell what might happen.
Yeah, and you make a good point that the same Republicans and Democrats who are screaming about Russian influence in our elections are the very ones cheering now for U.S. influence in Venezuelan elections. Yeah. And people do say, well, why do you support Maduro? No, that's not the point. We oppose neocon regime change wars, and candidate Trump said the same thing. No more regime change wars. And here he is, caught up in the middle of this. I would say he's boxed in by the neocons, because you have a situation. My guess is, I could be wrong, because as you point out, there needs to be a catalyzing event. Maybe there will be some kind of a mass slaughter that'll get Marco Rubio cheering, and will be a catalyzing event. But absent that, it's unlikely that the coup will be ultimately successful. But it's going to be extremely hard for Maduro at this point, who has been very reluctant to do anything against Guaido. It's going to be almost impossible when you have someone appearing with military troops saying, we are overthrowing this government, and you do nothing about it. You really have lost your legitimacy, because that really is essentially what it is holding power. So he's going to have to make an arrest or something to Guaido after this if the coup fails. So the question is, and this is the neocons, how they position Trump. What is he going to do when that happens? What's he going to do when a move on Guaido is made?
And that might be their strategy, hoping Maduro would overstep his bounds or act more rational and do something about it. But they're looking for more confrontation, more excuse for getting rid of this guy, getting rid of Maduro. But it remains to be seen how this will unfold. But of course, as far as the American people are concerned, it would be better off if we had more of a peaceful approach to this, rather than saying, "Oh, this coup business, that's what we're good at."
Yeah,
and the only time we don't like coups is when we make up a coup that we don't like the Russians are interfering in our election. Oh, that kind of coup. These coups made up, they're really, really bad. But the real coups, they're okay as long as we're in charge and we're going to move our empire along and solidify our empire and our source of oil.
That's right, the oil. Because remember, just a few days, the U.S. is going to, they claim they're going to pull all of the Iranian oil offline, 1 million barrels a day out of the market. And, you know, securing some of that oil over there in Venezuela is not going to hurt. The other thing that's interesting is the thing about Guaido, he's been kind of a hapless figure so far. He calls for mass protests and no one shows up. I don't think he realizes right now that he's actually, I think, in my opinion, worth more dead than alive. Not only to the CIA, but also to his own opposition people. Something, you know, a shot in the crowd or something like this that took Guaido out. And I know it might shock you, Dr. Paul, but the CIA is pretty good at this kind of thing. That would really get things going. I think probably would maybe launch a U.S. Action.
I hate to even mention those things because what makes me nervous is we haven't thought of that. Oh, like, yeah, they have. Yeah, that's right. That's exactly what we want. It's not a threat that is going to cause harm, but we need to stir up the trouble even more so. But there will be a lot of cost to this. There will be always a cost to liberty, whether it's in Venezuela. You know, our activism in the last 10, 15 years in Venezuela with sanctions and all, it's hasn't helped us, it hasn't helped them, it hasn't helped the oil market, it hasn't moved in the right direction. But I just wonder about this senator from Florida. Where does he gain his authority? I think his name's Rubio or something. I mean, all of a sudden, he's the expert on Venezuela. I mean, like he's getting as much attention as Pompeo almost.
He was up at 3 in the morning tweeting. You know, he must have gotten tipped off. We have a couple of tweets, actually, as long as we're talking about how the U.S. is involved in this. Maybe we'll quickly look through a couple of these. Well, here's Bolton. The Venezuelan military must protect the Constitution and the Venezuelan people. It should stand by the National Assembly and the legitimate institutions against the usurpation of democracy. The U.S. stands with the people of Venezuela. You know, that's a funny thing. It's always couched in these terms of the people. So as the people who support Maduro don't count, you know, the only people that count are the people that support what we say. And here's a second one. Let's just do a quick trifecta here. Here's Rubio, our favorite neocon from Florida. After years of suffering, freedom is waiting for the people of Venezuela. Don't let them take this opportunity for you. Now is the moment to take it to the streets. And I won't read, they said, don't let this moment slip away. It may not come again. This is really remarkable. A senator from the state of Florida, not Caracas, he's telling the people of Venezuela, go in the streets and have a violent coup. I mean, that is, if something is not worthy of censure by the body of the Senate, I don't know what is. I mean, that is just shocking. And we'll finish up with Pompeo here, who was giving the administration's view. Interestingly, at last check, Trump has not said anything, but his handlers are. Today, interim President Juan Guaido, how long does that interim last? Announced the start of Operación Libertad. The U.S. government fully supports the Venezuelan people in their quest for freedom and democracy. Democracy cannot be defeated, as they're calling for a military coup.
You know, talking about support and a democratic process, sometimes we pretend we can test that by just doing a poll. But there was an interesting poll that came about measuring stress on the man on the street in Venezuela versus in America. Actually, the people in Venezuela, the poll claimed they were less stressful than the American people were.
I believe it.
But
yeah.
I don't know. I'd be stressful. I'd be stressful either place right now. But you know, it can't be a very good situation. But it may not be quite what is being painted. If there was any legitimacy to this poll, you know, that people feel less stressed. But all you have to do is, you know, when the rich people in San Francisco are becoming stressful because of homelessness and immigrants, you know, there is a lot of stress out there. There's an attack on somebody's livelihood or living conditions. So, and I think that's interesting. So that's a thing that they can't measure. It's just so tragic that this whole idea that we have to modify the government and it'll solve our problems. And this sort of is the far left, the socialist movement is, well, we have to do this, we have to do more, we have to have more government and all that. Well, the problems we have is a failure of government.
Yeah.
Too much spending and too much control and too many special interests, and all they want to do is expand it. And this is what happens in these situations. We keep expanding it, more spending and more interference and more dictation, and just no confidence whatsoever that if people would be left alone, they might be a shocking surprise. They might do better, just leave me alone. Let me go. Let me just take care of myself. But unfortunately, we're not close to that. We're going to have the media continue to propagandize in support of this coup, as usual. This coup actually is more public than most of them. We talked a lot about the coup going on in Ukraine, but not many other people even considered it being a coup until later on they finally figured it out. But it was not an event. But this one at least is out there, and I think that that's good, at least that more people are realizing, yes, we are involved down there, and we shouldn't be involved, and it's not going to lead to anything good.
And all of the promises about Ukraine, you remember, you're going to have much better lives, you got to get out in the streets and demonstrate for democracy and for progress. Well, the guy that we put in power, Poroshenko, was just voted out by a massive margin because people's standard of living is way worse. And this is always true with these coups. Look at Libya, look at Iraq and elsewhere. The standard of living is always worse. But you mentioned something interesting about how people are feeling less stressed in Venezuela, and people would say that seems counterintuitive. But I think that goes along with what you said earlier, is when you have an outside force putting pressure on you, you tend to kind of circle the wagons. And you probably see things in communities and in families where people are supporting each other in different ways because the U.S. has allowed itself to be, the enemy of all these people.
Helps to line up the ducks.
Yeah, it does. So this is a coup in progress. The neocons are hoping for bloodshed. Just before we went on, there was a formation of armed personnel carriers of the Venezuelan military. A group of protesters were attempting to stop them, and it looks like one of the troop carriers hit some of the protesters. Will this be the catalyzing event? It's possible. I bet you're going to see this and nothing else over and over on your TV screens today. And that will be what the neocons want to start this. Will Trump invade Venezuela? That is the big question. I hardly believe that can happen. The bigger question, I guess, is if this fails, will the neocons finally give up? Dr. Paul, the answer is no.
What comes of this is the big question. And one good thing that could come from it is a failure of this coup. And that's not impossible. A lot of our takeovers, even the military takeovers like Iraq, that's been a total failure, and Syria and all these things is a total failure. But the more it fails, the more the people in this country may wake up and say, well, we shouldn't have been involved there. It didn't work, cost a lot of money, and people died from it. So we have to get more people come to the conclusion that it makes good sense to have a very small government willing to defend us about any outside invasion, but then have a group of people in a system that agree that the biggest threat is internal. We have to try to protect our liberties from our own government and what's happening and the excessive spending and this expansion of our empire. That's where the real threat is. Yes, it's an imperfect world out there, but just think of how evil the Soviet Empire was. But we did not have to invade them. It was almost, to me, I thought it was like a miracle in 89, 90. All of a sudden, boom, no nuclear bombs dropped, and I remember the 60s well, having been drafted in the midst of the Cuban crisis. So it just dissipated because it was a failure. So yes, we should spread information, show that if a country is overly socialized and why they're having trouble, it should be an economic argument. If some of these rich guys are always involved in spending money overseas, why don't they set up an institution to invite people to come over here and learn free market economics and learn what the non-aggression principle is? That would, and then export those ideas. That would be a lot better export than exporting our guns and our violence and our coups. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.